Righty-ho! Hi everyone! Welcome again to AuthorStory. I'm Alexander Lim, your host, and for this episode, I'm interviewing Monica Burch, author of the book Speedy Strength. And for those of you following along who are interested, you can go over now to the Amazon link in the description below the video and check out or get a copy of the book. So Monica, welcome back to AuthorStory. We're very happy to have you as our guest once again today.
Well, thank you so much for inviting me back.
Cool. So, to our listeners, I would just like to point out that this isn't Monica's first time on AuthorStory. You were here late last August, correct?
Yes, I was.
Yes,
and I was with my book, Inside Robotics.
Yeah, we spoke about robotics, STEM education, and Construct You. So,
yes,
that's all technical learning stuff. Now, we'll be talking about your other book titled Speedy Strength. And, you know, personally, I can't help but wonder how different this is in terms of the subject matter. I mean, when we were talking about robotics, we were talking about engineering, math, teaching matters, and making these things engaging, while Speedy Strength is essentially a fable along the lines of Aesop's about a fish. But, you know, first about the book. Can you tell us a little bit more about it?
Okay, well, Speedy Strength, actually, it is, you're right, it is totally different from my other book.
Oh, yeah.
I started it years ago. My oldest son, who is now in college, was in kindergarten, and he had brought a fish home, betta fish.
Okay.
And he and I looked at the fish, and we were trying to decide on, what to do with it, because he was actually fish sitting for his school.
Okay.
And we looked into the betta fish, and it was a very interesting fish. And so I sat there and wrote up the story, and then, revisited off and on. And every time I revisited it, I actually added something different. Not just the information about the betta fish, because the betta fish are very interesting fishes, but the fact that Speedy himself, little things that happened as my son was growing, I would tell him, I used the fish a lot.
Okay,
to a point where he didn't want to hear any more about the fish. So, but one of the things is that, starting, he had left the school that he was at where he got the betta fish. He went to a different school, and we were talking about that, and I mentioned Speedy, which he was a little bit older then. He said, "Oh, Mom."
All right.
But I was talking about going from one environment to another environment, which is what Speedy does in the book.
Right.
So I kind of put that in there, how people, or even kids, when they go from one school to another school, depending on the kid, it depends on how they react. And in our story, Speedy actually, when he goes from his home, and he's taken from his home, and he's in this new environment, and there's no one else there with him, he's just by himself, and he sees other creatures outside, but he's not who he was when he was at home. He changes, and it's not for the best. He kind of shrinks. He doesn't, he doesn't, he's not the person he was before. So that's what happens with Speedy. And I was just telling that to my son, I didn't want that to happen to him, when it didn't. But Speedy changes in the book because of it. If you want me to get more into the story, because the story is, I think, it's a fun story, because it's something a betta fish actually does.
Right.
If they don't know that, if they see somebody brings a mirror, and Speedy sees a picture of himself in the mirror, he thinks it's another betta fish. And one of the things that betta fishes over time were bred to actually fight other fish. So if they see another fish, it's time to fight. But Speedy, along with him changing that environment, Speedy also is a different type of fish. He learned when he was young that even though, betta fish, as they grew older, they started fighting. He didn't want to be a fighter. He wanted to be a fast swimmer, and he wanted to be different. And so he was different, and by being different, his brothers, they actually start following him. They all did something different than what nature had them to do. So, but when he sees this fish, he kind of goes back to that point, well, okay, do I have to fight this fish? Maybe, so what do I do? So then he starts training, and I put the training component in, because one of the things I was trying to tell my kids as they were growing too, is that when you want something, you have to work at it.
Right.
Things, they don't come easy. If you want it bad enough, it takes more time. It takes a lot of work, and you have to do that. And that is something my younger son pointed out with the book, because he fences, and he's
Okay.
always, he's always fencing.
Right.
He fences at the gym, and this weekend we're going away to Detroit to the
Hmm.
North American Cup, and he's fencing there.
Okay.
So, but
Cool.
it's also a mental thing too. So with Speedy, he had to do something like that too. So that's, the book has a lot of different stories within
Hmm.
that one story in it.
Right. Okay. So it sounds like this is like a multi-layered book, but essentially, for whom is Speedy Strength intended? For what particular audience?
Well, I haven't targeted for a pre-K to third. It's something with a parent to read to the kids, and for the kids to read once they get to a certain point, they can read the book.
Hmm.
And also is there for a parent to read to a kid, because there's certain little things you can explain that Speedy did, that you can work with your kid on. For example, if they're going to a new school, this is a good book for that. It's
Hmm.
just and something you want to work for, then it's a good book for that too. Saying, see how he worked to do this,
Right.
and so it's a lot of little things in it, that you and one of the a friend of mine who after read the book and said one of the interesting things she thought about it was the fact that when you're looking at when Speedy, the person Speedy was, working hard to beat or working hard to overcome, was himself.
Hmm.
So that's a part of the book too. So it's a
Okay.
lot of different layers to it.
All right. Cool. So I got that the book kind of sprang from all the stories you created about a fish that your son brought home from school. But what made you decide to write this book itself? Speedy Strength itself.
Um, I like to write, and I
Okay.
at that point I just was fascinated with the beta fish.
Okay.
Um, I was just fascinated with them, and so I took it to this level by writing this story, because now I'm actually thinking about combining the story and writing one that has robotics and
Hmm.
Speedy in it, because I I just did this whole year of a spider robot, and I'm thinking, what would Speedy do if he's in a bowl and this robot comes up and it
Right.
hits his bowl. So that's the premises of what's in my head right now, which I have to put on paper.
Right.
So it just depends on what comes to me when I'm writing. The thing is, I love to write, but I haven't published a lot of different books.
Hmm.
I have a lot of things I've written I haven't completed. I think that's all writers do that. And then there's some things that I just have to finish up
Hmm.
and I have in my head, so I just got to put it on paper.
All
And
right.
Speedy was one of those things I put on paper.
All right. Cool. Well, here's to hoping that you can put more on paper because it sounds like you've got a lot of interesting stories to tell.
Well, thank you.
All right. Cool. So the main character Speedy, he's a blue beta. I believe it's
Yes,
Siamese fighting fish.
that's correct.
All right. So, for the sake of those of us who aren't in the know, myself included, can you tell us what blue betas are all about? Like where they live, what their behavior is, the like?
Well, the great thing about the book, actually, in the back of it, I have a little section my oldest son wrote up to tell you
Hmm.
about the betta fish, where they come from, the Thailand, and the water they're in, and warm. They're in this warm water. The thing about the betta fish, though, they're beautiful. They're beautiful fish.
Hmm.
They have very beautiful colors. But um, when we actually, I guess we could say we engineered them and changed them somewhat out of their natural habitat, because the betta fish are in Thailand and in that area, and they're very they're very protective fish, and that's where the we call them fighting fish, because of the fact that they're protective, and I think the fighting component was bred in them too.
Hmm.
If you read that over time, it says that, because some of the fish like that are natural in their natural habitat are beautiful, but the ones that are outside of her are more because of what we've done to kind of breed and engineer them somewhat, which is
Right.
interesting with the
Hmm.
fish.
Okay. So, is there anything about blue betas that really surprised you when you were looking into them?
Well, the thing was is that the interesting thing is, when I was looking into them, is two couple of things. Is one of the things that people say you shouldn't have but one beta fish,
Hmm.
because they will actually hurt other fish in, if you have them in a fish
Right.
bowl. But in nature, they're not alone. They have other fish. But I think, again, I think what was interesting is the changes of what I read of the fish, the in nature, and what we've done now that we know when we have them in fish tanks and when we sell them, what type of fish, how their personality has changed a little bit from the years and years and years and years and years and years of us breeding them
Right.
outside of their natural environment. And I
Mm.
think that's the interesting thing because they're called fighting fish. They fight each other, and that's one of the things I was trying to show. Even though their nature is to fight, and all of us have something that in our nature, but some of those things you can change. And I was trying to show that you can always change that part of your nature too. So that's one of the
Mm.
things I wanted to show too. Even though the nature was to fight, he could change his nature and he could do something different.
Mm. Okay, I got that. And I'm really surprised at the I don't know, the species of the protagonist, because when you think fishes, I mean, I don't think I'm not really certain that people can empathize with a fish. So I think the choice of a fish for a protagonist is very interesting.
That is funny. I'm not sure why I did that actually, but I have a lot of stories about him in my head. So it is interesting. I think of there is limitations because they are in a fishbowl, so they can't do too much. But I guess the fact is I just like that type of fish.
Oh, okay.
And there are not a lot of there are a lot of people who have betta fish. I mean, people, if you love betta fish, and there's a lot of people who have, because they're beautiful fish.
Hmm.
There are a lot of people with them. So I just wanted to write something out there for those people who love fish. Actually, we had one for a short time
Hmm.
that was our own that we had purchased when my son was younger. And I will say for a short time, because although betta fish are strong fish,
Hmm.
and they can live actually in most environments, even though you don't do what you would do with other fish. The water might be dirtier than some, that
Right.
they can still live in that.
Right.
So that was one of the reasons I did get the I got the fish. But I have to say, we were just a little bit even though they could live in a tough environment, we were a little bit tougher than the fish. So
Okay.
we didn't. So it didn't last long in our
All
family.
right.
Um,
Okay. Yeah, but I'm sure it lasted long enough.
yes, it did. But could have lasted longer if my son was really surprised.
Right. Okay. All right, cool. So on the surface, this seems to be, just a kid's story, a story that you read to kids, but there's also more than that. It's apparently, and correct me if I'm wrong, a parable about working hard to achieve one's full potential, and I can't help but
Yes.
wonder about your involvement with making STEM more accessible to others. Did your involvement with STEM have any bearing on your reason for writing the book or how you wrote the book out?
When I first started the book, I wanted to put more of the thing about when I first wrote the book, I wanted to put more of the science in it.
Hmm.
I wanted to write more about the betta fish, the
Okay.
science of the fish, the more of that. But then as I got into the story, I just I couldn't put that together.
Uh-huh.
And I love those. And the thing about it, I love those type of books. When I see a book that, explains something and is for a kid, and there's some really great ones out there. I love reading them, but I just had a hard time doing that for the fish because I wanted to do a fun book about betta fish and has more of, information about them. And
Hmm.
I thought, well, maybe I could write the story, and then on the other page, I could put a little bit about it. But at the end, we just, my son did his little research, and we just put a page about what a betta fish is, and just
Hmm.
hoping people could, do more research. So, that's one of the things that because the whole science component of STEM, and I always tell people with STEM, there's it's science, technology, engineering, math, which is a very broad. It covers a lot of stuff, and just the study of fish itself is science.
Right.
And
Okay.
the technology you have to use to allow them to live outside of their natural environment. And then you think, and there's so many things I could just throw out there because then you have the engineering that developed that technology, and
Right.
of course there's that math you have to put in it too.
Right.
So it is all there, but I just didn't do enough in my book. So it's more of a nice story that teaches a lesson, and hopefully it's enjoyable, and there's things in your life that you can relate to the fish. And when you're teaching your child or reading it to your child, you can point out some things and just to talk to them about things so they can think about something that's happening to them and how to deal with it.
All right, cool. All right, interesting. Got that. You know, uh, for me, another story that comes to mind about, fighting and achieving one's full potential is, and let's face it, the classic film Rocky. So I really have to ask, did this or other stories like that influence the way you created the story, influenced your choice of story?
That's a good point. It did it in a way, but you know what? Um, what happened is that when I first wrote it and before I published it, and everything happened, but I didn't have him um, do that one section where I added into the book where him working harder to overcome, to know that he has to fight and do this, train. I didn't have that training section in it, and I added that before I published it. I added that too because again, what happened is that I think we were my son and I had went to one of his fencing tournaments, and it was a very interesting tournament. It was hard. It was a hard one,
Right.
and so I sat there and I was going through the book again. I said, okay, I'm going to really publish it this time. So
Okay.
that's when I added that section because I was thinking that um, even though you have to really really train, and it's about training not only your body, sometimes about training your mind too.
Right. Right.
And so that's when I added that section to it.
Okay. Cool. Interesting. So we can say then that the training session is more influenced by your son than by Rocky.
Yes, I can. Although I do love that movie.
Right. Right. Well, hard to find someone who doesn't. Okay, on the surface, this is just a fable, but I can see how, it's got many layers. It can leave a lasting impression generations of kids, children, even grown-ups. Uh, how do you think people will take to the story maybe, I don't know, 50, 100 years from now if it's, if it's still around by then, if it's still told by that time?
Well, that is a good question because I never thought about that.
Hmm.
I hope it will be around by that time, and I hope it will show the beta fish and in this environment, and also the fact that he had the train um, to overcome, and also the fact that he also had to change or um, to be better and to
Right.
train and be better. So I hope that's something that stays with people, and I hope the book's around then. But I never thought about it in that sense, and I guess I should.
Yeah, I mean, it's got a good, from what I understand, it's got a good moral lesson. It's relevant to people developing themselves. And I guess no matter what age, what society, people will need to develop themselves or find a way to develop themselves.
That's true. That is true. And sometimes, it's hard. It's hard to stay in that box that you're in, and it's easier too. But when you have to develop, it takes a little time and effort. And I do think that hopefully the book will help somebody who's reading it to their child when there's something that they have to face in school or in
Right.
sports or
Right.
just in life. And know you just got to work a little harder, and you can achieve whatever you want to achieve.
Right. Okay, cool. So I think you mentioned earlier that Speedy's next adventure will be with or against a spider robot. I mean, hey, robotics. Can you give us any,
Yes.
yeah, can you give us any juicy details on it?
Oh, well, that it's still in my head, but
All right.
uh, I'm what I'm thinking about. I have this great spider robot that I've been making with my kids,
Right.
and I'm trying to, I'm thinking this little tape robot in the
Uh, Hello,
So that's the story. It's all good. There's that somebody they put the spider robot on a table where Speedy
okay.
has his fish bowl, and that robot hits the bowl, and then whatever happens from there is the story.
Oh, okay. All right. Okay, cool.
So
All right. Yeah, that sounds
so that's
interesting
going to be
enough.
interesting
All
because
right.
I have
Yeah.
several things that
Anything.
might happen. But one of the great things about it is that I hope to introduce that spider robot too in there in that
Right.
story.
All right. Cool. Definitely. So, do you have any plans for a Speedy series?
Um, I'm gonna actually what I was gonna do with the Speedy Strength was the one book, and I'm gonna do the robot. And then what I was just gonna do is go do a little short. I'm thinking about actually doing a little short book. Just it's called Just Speedy, and
Mm-hmm.
just talk about take something from the beginning of the book and add a little bit, expand on the beginning a little bit more, just to talk about him because
Mm.
I had somebody ask me about they wish they knew a little bit about Speedy
Right.
before,
Right.
because I introduce his family, but they want to know a little bit more. So what I was going to do is just do something that says Just Speedy and just do it just a little bit more as an introduction. So that's going to actually be before the spider robot, and I'm working on that now. I'm taking
Okay.
pieces out of the existing book and I'm just adding a little bit more to it where he was in his natural environment before he left. And I'm
Right.
just talking about that.
All right. Cool. Cool. I got that. So, I mean, Speedy sounds like an interesting character. What do you think about his becoming a cartoon franchise character?
Well, that would be interesting. It would be nice. It would be good. There's a lot of things you could do with him.
Yeah.
But it would be nice. It would be nice. I would love to see that because I could see a lot of things that he could do that can help kids. And then I can see where you can add some STEM in there. That would be great too. So there's a lot of things you can do with it.
All right. Cool. Great. So, are there any last words of wisdom you'd like to share to inspire listeners in the last few minutes of this interview?
Well, I just would love for them to get the book, and if they have questions, they can always just email me at constructu@constructu@gmail.com.
Okay.
So, and also that the book itself, like I said, I just love the different layers, and some of them, even though I wrote it, I discovered I put in them. It's interesting. You write something and you realize what you put in the book and when you put it in and why you did it.
Hmm.
And that's some of the things I discovered. Just like you asked me about with my son, I realized that was the reason I put it in at that point in time. And
Right.
the fact that there's that just looking at yourself and knowing that the person that you have to overcome and you have to work on is really yourself. And
Mm.
that's what the reflection in the mirror shows with Speedy too.
Okay.
So
Cool.
it's really about just you're working within yourself, and that's the important part.
All right. Nice. So let me just confirm the email address is constructu@gmail.com. Is this correct?
That's correct. Yes.
All right. Okay. Cool. So any of our listeners out there, that's the email address if you want to give feedback or otherwise get in touch with Monica. So, in closing, then, our guest is author Monica Burch. Her second book here on AuthorStory is Speedy Strength, and you can find it on Amazon. So, Monica, thank you very much for your time and for being on AuthorStory the second time around. It's a real pleasure to have had you with us again.
Thank you so much for inviting me.
Welcome. And of course, for those of you listening, if you do want to get Monica's book, Speedy Strength, you can get it right now by going to the Amazon link in the description below the video. And if you'd like to follow our author interviews on YouTube, you're all very welcome to subscribe. So long for now, but I'll be back on AuthorStory next time with another inspiring author.